Alright guys, such comic again today. Hope you're all doing well and enjoying your day so far. Some serious roster developments last night with the majority, it seems now, of the top teams having at least some sort of solid roster locked into place. Yes, the contracts may not yet be signed, but we have a good idea what these top teams are up to and what it means for the rest of the players and the teams in this league. Also, big drama continuing over at the Miami Heretics. What's going on as well with the Falcons team? We think they're bringing in Cellium, but which AR will they use to round out their roster, and what does the money say about making that situation happen? Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy, subscribe if you're new. As always, we're going to dive straight back in to what's been happening in Spain. Yesterday was chaos. O4 was getting involved to some degree as well. Renko was in the replies. And, well, let's just get into it. So, we saw yesterday that Real had signed with Koi. Now, that's not been officially confirmed yet, and as it stands, surprisingly enough, they still have the Miami affiliate thing for Real. Now, given what we're about to see Miami say, I'm relatively surprised they haven't just taken it off him immediately. Unless they think that there's actually a world where they could somehow get him back. So he says, I prefer not to speak. He spoke with Heretics. They gave him an offer. The understanding is that Koi is in Toronto. They've wanted him before. There's massive intra-Spanish rivalry between those two organizations, especially now Toronto Ultra becoming Koi, and they're taking a, let's say a bigger role in that organization. We even had aBeZy, one of the biggest creators on the planet, getting involved in this drama as well, of course, owner of that Koi team. So they apparently went to Rail and offered him triple what he was getting paid on Heretics. Then Miami came back and said, okay, look, stay, we will match that offer. But he decided not to stay. So yesterday, Heretics came out with an absolutely sensational post. And you don't really see the like of this very often. So it is just absolutely brilliant. So they do this statement. Now, what the intention of this statement is, I guess you can come up with your opinion on that. But they say, Heretics was born in Call of Duty. A large part of our history is tied to this game. In 2019, none of the Spanish organizations made it into the franchise league, leaving the Spanish-speaking community active for over 15 years, heartbroken and at risk of fading away. Since then, we worked tirelessly to return to the competition and bring representation back to our community. That's why the announcement of our comeback to the CDL a couple of years ago through Miami Heretics was such an important thing, which is all fair enough. I think the reason why they're leading with this outline is because what they're trying to say is that Koi are kind of like breaking up the Spanish project in a way. Like, I know that it's business at the end of the day, right? And it's a little bit personal, I'm sure, for many of these guys. Especially on the Heretic side, it seems to be the case, but the feeling was certainly from the Heretics owners is like, okay, look, you're stealing Real to bring him onto a team that isn't the Spanish team. You're kind of destroying the Spanish scene. I think that's kind of the way that Heretics feel about it. But as always, it's already dramatic when you're involving these type of organizations. They say, after a significant generational change, we experienced the best year in our history this year, bringing in Rancor, etc., etc. However, yesterday an event occurred that, in addition to preventing the continuity of our roster, we believe is important to share. This is just brilliant. At 21:59 hours Central European time on August the 9th, player Real verbally accepted the conditions he himself had requested to renew his contract with Miami Heretics. Presumably, Koi said, we'll triple your salary. He said, if you guys triple it, I'll stay. In esports, verbal agreements are a common practice and traditionally are respected by agents, players and teams. Just a few hours later, while we were working on drafting the contract, rumours began to circulate on social media claiming that the player and his agent had signed with another organisation. So far, and despite our insistence, neither the player nor his agent have confirmed the breach of this verbal agreement. Although we understand from third-party statements that he has already signed with another team, we want to express our full understanding of a player's decision to change teams, but we strongly reject the breach of verbal agreements as it damages the trust and the respect that should prevail in our industry. So, yeah, Real presumably told them, hey, I'm down. And then Koi came back and were like, well, we got a better team, sign here. And then he signed here. And it's like, okay, Heretics can be butthurt over it all they want. And, I understand it, right? Okay, if Real said one thing and then did another, but it is what it is. And the idea that, at the end of the day, organizations are not loyal to players. Players should not be loyal to organizations. It's just the reality of esports and business. And, it's the same thing for any job that you might do. Don't be loyal to the company that you work for, or, because they will fire you in a heartbeat if they want you gone. So, it's kind of the same story here, I think. Yeah, I feel kind of bad for the Heretics guys that they thought they were going to get Real and they didn't. But it's not like the bottom line is verbal agreements don't mean much anyway. Like, let's put it straight up. Like, if you say, oh yeah, I'll do that, and then you don't, it's like, what are you going to do? Take him to court? Like, pretend that he's got to join? It is what it is. Unlucky, I guess. And also, it's not like, yeah, it's kind of screwed Heretics. They don't get to keep a player that they wanted to keep. But it's not like they were about to sign somebody else and told him no because we're getting Real back. Like, if Real had said, okay, I'm going to sign, and as a result of that, Heretics then discarded another option that then signed with some other team, and now they've kind of been screwed over by Real, telling them that he would and then not doing so, then yeah, I would understand some more frustration. But in this case, like, nothing really changes. He was probably going to leave anyway. They tried to offer him enough money to stay and it didn't happen. Now, the reasons why he's left are still fascinating. Hastro was even quote tweeting this and saying, I'm not going to lie, this made me laugh out loud. And Clayster says, actually JCap says, Org's trying to guilt trip players and even vilify players pisses me off. Players have a short window to be pro and got to make the most of it and should be selfish about off-season decisions. Posting this as if he betrayed the Spanish-speaking community is such a weak move. And Clayster's trying to flip the script on a player who for 2 seasons helped your org reach the highest it has ever been in COD is insane. Verbal agreement, yeah, okay, bud. I think Clace is trying to say, well, welcome to esports, baby. Like, well, this shouldn't be a surprise. And I get J-Cap's perspective as well, that, Real's done a lot for that team. And they've basically come up with a statement to roast him and say that he's, like, not a good guy, right? Like, that's the implication anyway. So pretty funny. Now, Real then does a tweet and says, this is the saddest thing that I've seen in a long time. None of the bosses are coming out and making it public how they were forcing one of their team members to cut more than half of their salary so I could stay. And they don't even talk about the conditions my other 3 colleagues have. So that got real interesting. And then he followed up and said, I'm not going to accept an offer that benefits me financially but harms others. And knowing the conditions my other colleagues have, accepting that offer would be selfish. So before you say nonsense, you should know the whole story. So this kind of came out of nowhere, especially when the guy from Heretics, Gorgo, then comes out and says, this is totally false. No one's been asked to take a pay cut. In fact, everyone had offers for contract renewals with increases. Completely respectable if you change clubs. Unacceptable that you lie and break a verbal agreement. So it was all going on. And then people wondering, okay, well, where did Real come up with this idea that his teammates were going to have to take pay cuts in order for him to get the salary bump? Well, apparently Method Sick, the coach of Heretics, told him that. So, in their negotiations, I don't know. So Method Sick says, what Real said was a misunderstanding. Heretics didn't ask anyone to lower their salary. It was me who told Real that in an attempt to keep us all together. I was willing to lower my salary. So, I'm just all a bit confused by this. Like, what did Method Sick tell him? He was like, yeah, well, if we are going to keep you on, we're going to have to, I'm going to have to take a cut. Maybe the other guys are going to have to take a cut as well, which apparently wasn't even true. So, well done. You played yourself, really, because you managed to push him away because he was like, well, I'm not going to come back and take triple if it means I'm going to screw my teammates. So then, in his opinion, for Real's perspective, that verbal agreement didn't count for much because his understanding was different to what actually happened. Anyway, Method 6 says, didn't want the beautiful project to end this way, but it is what it is. And that's basically the timeline of the last 48 hours. So it's been absolute chaos. Real, though, is going to end up on Toronto and with a team we'll see in a second. The big question for many is what's going to happen now for the Heretics. Rumour has it that Real actually had an even better offer from Gentlemates. They wanted him as well. And he wanted, though, to team with CleanX, so he's ended up going where he is. The Koi and Team Heretics offers similar in value but lower than Gentlemates. That is the big rumour. The other big rumour then, as we get into some of this other roster stuff, is the player they might target instead. Because with Rencor and Super there as your ARs, if Real's gone, you've not really got any other great SMG options from Spain. Okay, you can bring back Eric Boom, and he's okay, but it's probably not, he's not Real, right? Like, he was a key piece of their team. So, rumour has it, they might now be looking at Snoopy. This kind of makes sense. Try and get Snoopy. If Boston will sell him, I'm sure they'll want a lot of money for Snoopy, but it could be done. Mexican player, I know that dialects and stuff might need to be worked out, but he obviously speaks Spanish, so there's something in that potentially. I know that some have also suggested, could you try and get Snoopy and Purge, bring that over as your SMG duo? It's maybe not something totally impossible. So we'll probably come back to that in the coming days. But obviously I wanted to discuss in a bit more detail what's going on with some of the top CDL teams for now and how that's going to trickle down. Speaking of Hastra as well, he actually does make it very clear here that he wants to find a reasonable path back into the Call of Duty League, in whatever way that might potentially be. But let's get into FaZe. Abuzah signed his contract. We saw the other day that 04, we think, signed his contract. We think both of these guys are going to FaZe in addition to, we believe, the return of Drazah. So Simp isn't going anywhere. 04 and Abuzah seem to be the duo from Surge coming into that FaZe team. The fourth was a matter of big debate for some time. We thought that Ghosty could have been an option. There were other names that could have been an option too. But it looks like Drazah is going to come back. Now, for some time, we thought that Drazah was maybe going to follow Kenny to Toronto. But obviously, Kenny then, we think, got the call from Thieves to say, hey, we want you here instead of Ghosty. And that left Drazah, who was never going to go to Thieves, in a bit of no man's land. So it looks like he's going back to FaZe, which to me is great for the scene, right? Like, I think Drazah fits FaZe and like the culture over there and them kind of being the villains and all this. Like, it fits very nicely. Simp and Drazah continuing. The Drazah, Abuzah, AR duo, Simp and 04. What do you think about this team? If this is the team that comes through, like, I'm not going to discuss the teams in length and pros and cons today because we can do that in due course when things actually get confirmed, because I also wouldn't say that anything is still a guarantee until contracts are actually signed and locked in. Maybe that's the case for 04 and Abuzah now. Maybe it's going to be the case for Drazah soon. He tweeted this out yesterday playing some Black Ops 3 8, and FaZe were in the reply saying, you know, basically signed the contract. So they're, well, basically saying on the timeline, like, yeah, we want Drazah back in. Is this team going to be any good? Could they have done better? I kind of like it. Like, I will say I kind of like it, but we'll discuss in the coming days if that gets confirmed. Now, this is very interesting what Toronto are doing, because we thought for some time they were trying to get aBeZy, and I think probably they were. But that's not happened. We think aBeZy might well be going to Thieves, although times could change on that. Like, if Falcons come along and they decide to bump up the numbers they're offering quite significantly, anything in this roster period is still open for interpretation. But it looks like CleanX and Insight are going to be back in it again with Toronto. So how many years have this happened in a row now where these guys are like potentially off the team? Even Insight last year was like, look, I'm an RFA, I'm looking for another team. And then they brought him back anyway. This year their contracts are up. It looked like CleanX was maybe going to go elsewhere. Maybe he could have gone to FaZe. Maybe you could have gone to Thieves or even to Falcons or something like that. And Insight, well, you might have thought that given the Simp and aBeZy, they won 2 events last year, they still blew up the Tiny Terrors. You might have thought that CleanX and Insight would have blown it up by now. But no, it looks like they're going to run it back again, and CleanX and Insight are going to come into that Toronto team again alongside JoeDeceives and Real, right? So they signed Real, JoeDeceives isn't going anywhere, so that is presumably the team of 4. So look, I still like it. I'm not unhappy with what Toronto have, you know, tried to build in terms of like an upgrade here. They were pretty good this year, but maybe feel like they can just get better with a one-man move. Maybe CleanX stays on the flex. I don't know. Maybe there's some value in that. Is it the perfect option? Is it as good as they could have done? Possibly not. There's also understandably talk about Abe, right? Not aBeZy, but Abe, the player who played with him at the World Cup. And he's a restricted FA. But they actually confirmed, I think, that he's got no buyout. He says, Ultras allow me to explore my options with no buyout at all. So technically he's under contract, and, you know, fair play to Adam Adamu and the guys at Toronto for kind of clarifying this and saying, look, we extended his deal. We want the kid to stay, but if there's interest and he wants to leave, we won't charge a buyout. So, honestly, fair play. It's pretty good business stuff. Definitely doing right by the players, at least it seems that way right now on Toronto. And he says, look, it's his backstop if he... Basically, they'll keep him on the bench if nobody else wants him, but if they do, then they are willing to let him go. So, that's what we think Toronto are doing. The next question is what are Falcons doing? We talked about it yesterday, that Sib was a serious consideration for them. It's made sense for a long time, Sib and Pred being together. But look, let's be real. When you've got Pred and, let's say, Cellium and Exnid on a team of 3, is Sib the man to get? You might argue yes, because you might say, well, Exnid isn't going to bring as much slaying, so you bring in Sib and you just max out the slaying and you try and win off pure gunny. Maybe that works. The other option, though, is to go and try and get Ghosty. And that's the big rumor right now. If they don't get Sib, or maybe they're more interested in Ghosty. But it's one of the two, pretty much. It's one of the two to close out that team. Could Ghosty be better? Would he provide more comms? Is that what that team would need? With Cellium and Pred and Exnid? Quite possibly, yes. So, yeah, what do you guys think, right? Would you sign Sib or Ghosty? They both have pros and they both have cons, I would say. I don't know. I kind of like the idea of bringing Ghosty in there, but I don't know how that team would work culturally. It's probably a pretty good question to consider. And if that doesn't happen for Ghosty, then it looks like Gentlemate is the backup plan. This is the final roster we're going to discuss in the video, as I say, been a lot going on. But it looks like Gentomate are looking at Neptune and Ghosty. So Neptune not really in the consideration for the top teams, which has been a surprise to some. We'll talk about what Shotzzy has to say on that later today, more than likely. But Ghosty and Neptune as a team of two starting out the Gentomate roster as they're trying to form something kind of competitive. And Ghost to Hope says, although his obviously batting average hasn't been the best this roster, but he does say Ghosty, Neptune, Nastie, Envoy. That's a reasonable team of four they will get to. Effectively best of the rest that aren't getting signed to the top teams will go to Gentomates who have some money to throw around and are willing to try and form a particularly competitive team next year. So that's where we're going to leave the Rostermania discussion for the day. Very much interested to your thoughts on all of this stuff in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care. And I'll see you next time.